at verse 21, 22. If you've got your Bibles, you want to open them up. In verse 21 and 22, we've got Jesus coming to synagogue. We mentioned the synagogue a little bit before. I just pulled up some random pictures. This is not the one at Capernaum. And the reason I didn't put the one up here from Capernaum, we've actually got the synagogue at Capernaum that we're talking about here, right? It's really, to me, things like that give me goosebumps. Problem is, it looks like a field with a couple little stones. I mean, the ruins there, there's just not much there. And I wanted you to get the feel for what a synagogue was like. So, before I jump in and talk about synagogues, and I don't want to get off track, don't want to talk about this too much, but if I were to ask you childhood memory, specifically, maybe the first place you lived, not just your house, but the town you grew up in. You know, what images come to mind, right? For people like me, I grew up in a family where we were so involved in the church. A lot of my earliest remembrances were running around the church building, not church service, but running around the church building, you know, playing with my friends and stuff like that as a little guy before I'm even in school and stuff like that. But I have these mental images. Well, you probably have, I don't know, a park, a school, a house, someplace in the country. You probably have some images that come to mind, right? In the first century, in fact, more than the first century, from the time during the intertestamental period, 400 years before the New Testament, on into the first couple centuries, Christ's ministry, New Testament. If you were a Jew, your childhood memories would be around the synagogue. Synagogue was not just a place where kind of you went to church. It was a place where you went to church, so to speak. Which, by the way, was there such a thing as church in the Old Testament?
Not the way we live.
You think this is a trick question, don't you?
Yeah.
It is. Yes. What does the word church mean?
Assembly.
It's an assembly of the
Saints.
called out ones. The word literally means called out, but it is an assembly of those who are called out to be different. Did God have a church in the Old Testament? Yes. Do we talk about the establishment of the church in the New Testament? Yes. How can we do both? Because God had his people who would congregate and meet with his people in the Old Testament. But when the new covenant went into effect, Acts the 2nd chapter, we have the church that you and I are part of too, as God's people, the assembly of God's people who are called out from the world to live the way God wants us to live. Okay, the Jews, however, in Old Testament times would have the synagogue be a part of their, I almost said the word worship. Really trying to guard against that. Every time I go to a service, this is online, so I'm going to ramble just a little bit, okay? Well, I don't know who in the world's listening, but I have an opportunity to speak to preachers when I go up north in this little group, and I try to challenge them. When you have people come together for the assembly, if you welcome them to worship, I really want to challenge your thinking. Because according to Romans, the 12th chapter, the first couple of verses, our worship is something we do 24/7. In fact, this really hit me years ago when there used to be these signs that a lot of churches would put up in their buildings, and the sign would say, "Enter to worship." And then when you went outside, on the way out, there would be another sign that said, "Depart to serve." And I remember as a younger person listening to a sermon where the guy said, you know what, those signs ought to be switched. And the more I think about it, I think that guy is so right. When you come together with the assembly, you are on the clock as far as God's concerned. You are here to encourage and stimulate and bring out the best in our brothers and sisters. We're on duty. So you come in to serve and you go out to worship. What is worship? It's blowing a kiss to God and saying, God, I didn't honk my horn at that guy that just cut me off. Are you pleased? That was an act of worship if you controlled yourself, right? You know, things like that. Anything that you do of that nature. Okay. Synagogues were not just places where they came to study together and meet together. It was the cultural center of the Jewish person's life. It meant so much. So you would congregate there on a daily basis. In fact, a lot of the education which, by the way, this is kind of fascinating to me too, because this is before the time of Christ and in the first century, a lot of formalized education. Because I don't know what you, but a lot of people think, well, haven't parents always sent their kids to school? No. It was the responsibility of the parents to teach their children, except in Jewish communities. Jewish communities were the ones that, way back in Jesus' time, had a formalized education where the parents, yes, you were responsible to teach your children, but they would bring together their children and have a formal education as well. A lot of communities didn't do that. Where did that take place? It took place in the synagogue. I'm just trying to emphasize the fact that the synagogue was a huge center of life. And when you get over to the Gospel of John, the 9th chapter, that's why when somebody threatens to kick you out of the synagogue, it was like, wow, I'm excommunicated from life. Because that's where all your connections were and everything else. Okay, we are, a couple other things I just wanted to point out about the synagogue. You probably can't see this. The bema is here in the middle. That'd be a raised area. So even before Jesus' time, they had platforms. Platform for the speaker to stand on. They had podiums too. They had podiums. But the podium often did not look like this. The podium would often be extremely long and narrow. It was more like a judge's bench. Do you know why it was so long and narrow, Thomas? Can I pick on you? I am picking on you. Do you know why it was so long? Does anybody have an idea why it was so incredibly long? Let them roll out the scroll. They didn't have, now we flip open our Bibles, boom, there you go. You go like this. You couldn't do that in the Old Testament times. You had to, you read from right to left in Hebrew. So you had to go like this and roll out the scroll this way. And that's what they would do when they would read on the scroll. They would have seating all the way around. I can't tell you how much I love that. I would love for the pulpit to be right there so that people would be all around. You know why? I'm off track, sorry. But you know why? Because I just wish sometimes everybody else could see what you guys look like during this service. Everybody would be able to see that because everybody would be in the round and you'd be looking at it. And not only that, parents would be going,
yeah.
those kind of things, whatever. So you sat all around and the person in the middle would read, and that's exactly what Jesus did when he came back to Nazareth. This is not Nazareth, this is Capernaum. I'm finally ready to read. If you're with me, we're going to start with verse 23. Are you ready? Did I have a question? Yes, please.
Chapter 1.
Yes, Mark chapter 1. Sorry. But we've only been doing this for 5 or 6 weeks, and I'm still in chapter 1. So that's okay. That's okay. Mark chapter 1, verse 23, it says, and immediately there was in the synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out. Verse 24, what have you to do with, what have you to do with us? Why is he talking in the plural? Can you think of a couple of reasons here?
Mm-hmm. More than one demon?
Okay, more than one demon. Where in the world did you get the idea that can there be more than one demon inside of somebody?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to get over to chapter 5.
Yeah.
We're going to find a guy that has how many demons?
Yeah, about 1,000.
Probably a couple thousand. That's a lot of demons.
Mark, you'd have to count the pigs and find out.
Okay. That's a possibility. Having said that, I don't think that's what's going on here. The reason I don't think so is because he's going to switch from the plural to the singular in just a minute. So when he talks about the plural, probably the demon's talking about all us demons, not necessarily all the ones in this body. Mm-hmm. Right? He's speaking on behalf of the demonic world. And he knows, or this demon knows, that when Jesus comes, that's it for the demonic world. Right? So he says, what have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I should have underlined this too. He's talking about the plural, us, the demonic world. Then he switches to the singular. I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Okay, I just got to ask. Is he right?
Yes.
But shake your head like
yes.
this. Yeah, he's right. Is he a Jesus follower?
No.
No. Why in the world would a demon want to be confessing Jesus before other people? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing as Jesus people? Aren't we the ones supposed to be confessing? Why is a demon confessing him?
Maybe make Jesus look bad?
How would that make Jesus look bad?
Well, you got demons confessing him. Maybe he's in control of those demons.
Okay, you get over to chapter 3, and that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to say he cast out demons by the prince of demons. So maybe this is a ploy. I don't remember if I mentioned this last week or the last time we met or not, but there's another possibility. It was a strong belief in the first century and amongst a lot of the Jewish scholars that if you knew somebody's name, you could have power over them. In fact, it wasn't just the Jewish scholars. It was we've got a lot of historical documentation that talks about people who were involved in the what do you call that? The occult, right? When you cast spells, one of the important things for a spell to work is you have to know the name. Name means power. So is he trying to develop some sort of power? Maybe. I think there's more to it than that. My guess is he's playing into the very thought that the Jews are going to bring up in chapter 3. He's trying to discredit Jesus by being a follower of Jesus. Can some followers of Jesus actually discredit Jesus by being so? Yeah, I think there's just a whole lot here, and this is going much slower. Okay, so we know who you are. I wanted to throw up a couple pictures here real quick when we talk about demon possession. All the ones I got from The Exorcist, they wouldn't let me download. I guess they're copyrighted or whatever.
Yeah.
But you get all these kind of, you got that kind of image in your mind, right? Everybody's seen that, right? Okay, throughout church history, by the way, there's a ton of artwork on this stuff. Here's the only reason I put that up there. Most people's concept of an exorcism, what do I mean by exorcism?
Removing.
Casting a demon out. Oh, boy, the Jews did this in the first century as well, right? The Roman Catholic Church has a long history of this, right? Mm-hmm. The Jews are the ones that were really big into what we see with Roman Catholicism even today in exorcism. And all I'm trying to say is this. All sorts of ritual and all sorts of stuff you have to do, and the cross, the incantations, things you're supposed to say and stuff like that. None of that comes from Bible. You notice that? Can you think of any demon that gets cast out where they had to do these long ceremonies and stay up all night? No. The Jewish guys who cast out demons would practice that. But not in Scripture. Not in Scripture. When Jesus would cast out a demon, it was a word. Boom. You're out, right? But I want you to notice this exorcism. I find this fascinating. Jesus rebuked him. He's talking to the demon, right? Inside this guy. He rebukes him saying, what did he tell him to do first? Be
quiet.
Be silent. What was he saying? That he wants to shut up? Yes. There's certain people. I wonder I get off track all the time. My wife, when we were first married, in fact, before we were married, worked at a place. I'm not going to tell you the name of this place. The first two initials are JC, though. I won't tell you this. But she worked at a place, and she was trying so much to be a good Christian witness. And I just remember so vividly her talking about the day she was getting really close with this one person that worked there, and things were going well. And another employee walks up while she's having this God talk, right, with this person. And this other employee heard them talking about God and said, oh, well, I'm a Christian too. And Lori said it ruined everything because she was the worst employee in the whole company. And Lori just wanted to, put a hand over her mouth and say, would you just go away because you're ruining. You understand? Mm-hmm. Some people really are strong representations of this is what it means to be a changed person for Jesus. And other people kind of ruin it. Well, this is to the extreme because we're talking about a demon. He tells him to be silent from what he's saying. But notice this. He says, be silent and come out. Verse 26. And the unclean spirit convulsing him and doing what?
Crying out.
Crying out in a loud voice. What did he tell him to do?
Silent.
Would you call this being compliant?
Nope.
He told him to be quiet, and so in a loud voice, screaming, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going down the tubes, but I'm rebelling all the way, right? On the way out, he throws them into convulsions, screaming in a loud voice. He came out, and they were all amazed. Jesus didn't. One of the reasons I mentioned what the Jews did, because they went through all these. Jesus didn't have to go through any of that ceremony. Just a word, boom, come out. And he comes out, right? They're all amazed. Do you remember from last time we met? When it says that they were amazed, do you remember what the word amazed means? They were amazed because he spoke as one who had authority. What's the word amazed? That's exactly right. It means to slap you across the face. It's kind of like when he said something, it was like, pow, somebody smacked him in the face. It had such an impact on them. They were amazed. Which, by the way, I actually think this is a different, I didn't look this one up. This is probably a different Greek word for amazed. I'll have to go back and check it out. But the first time he mentions it in the first chapter, it literally means to be slapped. He says they were all amazed, and so they questioned among themselves, what is this? A new teaching with authority. That's exactly what they said before. Amazement and authority by what he did. Well, the authority he's showing here is over the demonic world, right? So he says, what authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. Over in 1 John chapter 3, verse 8, not the Gospel of John, but 1 John chapter 3, verse 8, it says, whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, and the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. There's a lot of reasons Jesus came. One of the reasons Jesus came was to overpower Satan. You have a beautiful description of that in Colossians, the 2nd chapter, where it talks about he makes a public spectacle of all the forces that were against him, triumph through the cross, right, against Satan. Okay, I'm going to skip this one because we need to go a little bit further. I want to try to make it to the end of the first chapter, if I can get to the next one here. Okay, he's in the area of Galilee. We've talked about this before, but where we're going right now is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. This is up in Capernaum, right? This is where Peter and Andrew are from. It says that at once his fame spread everywhere throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. So this is the Galilean ministry, and Jesus is extremely popular. That's going to play into these last few verses. He says in verse 29, and immediately he left immediately, remember that one? Mark's going to use this word more than anybody else. Immediately he left the synagogue, he entered into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. These are the four that we've already mentioned that Jesus called from their fishing, right? Verse 30, now Simon's mother-in-law, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
To have a mother-in-law, what does that tell you about you?
You have to have a wife.
You have to have a wife. Why is that significant? Who is this?
Peter.
And the early church developed this idea that to be a leader in the church, especially if you're going to be later on they would call them priests in the church or a bishop or a cardinal, you weren't allowed to marry. And the Catholic Church says that Peter was even above that, right? But you're not allowed to marry. Well, guess what? Peter was obviously married, had to be married because his mother-in-law lay ill, it says, with a fever, and immediately they told him about her, and he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve. Okay, well, why include this idea that she began to serve him? She's sick, he heals her, and then she's serving dinner.
That she's really healed.
Okay, I don't want to make more of this out of this than it is, but this is not like, okay, she's getting better. This is like nothing happened, like immediately. Yes, thank you. It's almost like nothing happened. It's like shocking. And Mark is presenting to us an amazing ministry of Jesus, okay? That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick and oppressed by the demon. Okay, why did they wait till evening to bring all the sick people to Jesus? What happens in the evening if you're a Jew?
Oh.
When the sun goes down, what does that mean to a Jewish person?
Next day.
It's the next day. Okay, what day is this? Go back up to verse 21. What does it say?
Oh, it's a
Sabbath day.
Yeah.
So what are you not allowed to do on the Sabbath day?
Any kind of work.
You're not allowed to do any kind of work. You're not supposed to be healed on the Sabbath day. You're not supposed to travel on the Sabbath day. Once the sun goes down, the Sabbath day's over. So as soon as the sun sets, then this is probably coming from all over the area because it's famous spread throughout the area, right? They're coming to Jesus. They're bringing the sick and those who are oppressed by demons. Mark's going to cover both illnesses and demonic, satanic forces. It says in verse 33, and the whole city was gathered together at the door, and he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. He's talking about these two, demonic and illness. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Okay, Mark already gave us a detailed account, but he's emphasizing the fact that it wasn't just that one demon. Right? It's a repeated thing, so Jesus is shutting them down. Please keep that in the back of your mind, because it's not just the demons that he's going to shut down. All right, we're going to see that in a few more verses here. It says, verse 35, and rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went to a desolate place, and there he prayed. He prayed. Okay, we're still in the first chapter. Mark is just giving us the highlights, but this is one of the things that Mark's going to repeat. Jesus frequently went away from everybody else. When the crowds are on to the point, it's going to say here at the end of the first chapter, he can't even go into a big city anymore. There's crowds. Right? And I know he's going to go to Jerusalem at feast time, things like that, but he is swarmed with people all the time. Still makes time to pray. Makes me think of one of my favorite quotes of Martin Luther. Martin Luther was once asked about his practice of praying, I believe it was 2 hours every morning. Wow. And his response to that was, I am so busy and I have so much to do. I don't think I could do it if I didn't pray. He didn't say, I've got so much to do, I don't have time to pray. The point he was making is, if I didn't pray, I couldn't do all that I do. I think Jesus is a great example of that. Getting aside to talk with the Father. And it says they found him and everybody was looking for him. I skipped verse 36, didn't I? And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. They told him that everybody's looking for you. And probably had something different in mind. It's kind of like, wow, you're popular. Wow, everybody's looking for you. And I'm guessing they're probably saying it, isn't this great? And that's not the way Jesus responds. He says to them, let us go to the next step. But we're drawing all the crowds. And Jesus says, yeah, it's time to go. Doesn't this make you think of the Gospel of John chapter 6? Gospel of John chapter 6 starts off with the feeding of the 5,000. It's just the men. So probably 10, 15,000 people. By the time you get to the end of the 6th chapter, everybody leaves. And he turns to the disciples and says, or the 12, are you going to leave me too? Right? Jesus, instead of drawing in the crowds, is actually leading crowds. Please think about that too. I'm hoping to draw this together. He says, let's go to the next town that we may preach there also. That's why I came. Came to preach, came to conquer Satan, right? He's laying out some themes here in the very first chapter. Verse 39, he went through all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues, casting out demons. This says in verse 40, and a leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling, said to him, if you will, you can make me clean. Okay, there are a lot of pictures of this. I really like this one, though, because this one, a lot of artist renderings don't show you how it eats away at the flesh. And leprosy, the way it's used in Scripture, is a very broad term. It encompasses a lot of things. But it's also one of the most dreaded things that can happen to you because you're, again, disassociated from your family, right? You weren't allowed to live with everybody else. You had to go and live in the outskirts. And when somebody came close, you're supposed to put your hand over your lip and say, unclean, unclean, to warn everybody so they couldn't get close to you. The reason I want you to remember that is you had to stay away from people and you were not allowed to touch people. Could not touch a leper. Against the law to touch a leper. This guy comes to him and says, you can make me clean. Move with pity. Verse 41. Move with pity. This is The word used here is really strong. In fact, translators have a difficult time with this. Some translators, does anybody have a translation that says he was mad? It's a very strong word. Some translations say moved with compassion, others anger. Okay, it's a word. If we talked about this word before, splotnos.
Yes.
It literally means moved in your guts. Okay, well, when you feel it in here, that could be a good thing. It could be a compassion thing, or it could be spitting nails thing, right? It just means extremely emotional, right? So he's moved with emotion, literally, and he says he stretched out his hand and touched him. Okay, did Jesus ever sin?
No.
That was a softball. Okay, Jesus never sinned, couldn't have sinned to be the sacrifice. They would never sin, right? Did he break the law here?
Their law.
You're not supposed to touch a leper. Did he touch the leper?
Yes.
He touched him and said to him, I will be clean. Okay, since I brought it up, I'm going to give you 2 quick responses here, and then I need to move on so I can wrap this up. No. Since I'm running out of time, I'm going to save that one for next week. I want you to think about why Jesus touched the leper, okay? And this time, Mike's going to remind me beforehand that I've got to answer that, why Jesus touched the leper. Let's get the last couple of verses here. It says, and immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean, and Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away and said to him, see to it that you say nothing. Okay, I got it. When he told the demons to be quiet. Mm-hmm. He's telling the guy who was healed to be quiet. He charged him. He says, say nothing to anyone, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded you. So he's telling them to keep the law. Right? You go back to the priest, you get examined, you bring the sacrifice that you're supposed to as proof to them. But he went out and began to talk freely about it. So this guy didn't pay attention to what Jesus said. And the news spread, so Jesus could no longer openly enter into the town, but was out in desolate places, and people were coming to him from every quarter. Here are the questions I want you to think about today as we divide up into groups. What's the difference between people being silent and the demons being silent? I get it, why the demons should be silent. Why does he tell the guy who was healed to be silent? And I will take the answer because Jesus can know, because the crowd's coming. That's part of it, but I think it goes more than that, right? I want you to think about that. Here's question number 2. In chapter 1, Mark focuses on Jesus' power over Satan, casting out demons, over sickness, even over the Sabbath, healing on the Sabbath. In fact, I should have expanded this in saying over the law. The law says you're not supposed to touch a leper, but guess what? Jesus touched a leper and he didn't break the law, but he's over the law. We'll talk more about that one next week, but he emphasizes his power. Why is it so important to see Jesus as all powerful? Chapter 1, and already Mark's presenting to us, nobody's ever seen anybody like Jesus. That's why I want you to get this Superman S in your mind when you look at the Gospel of Mark, because Mark is really presenting Jesus as all powerful. Why is that so important? And question number 3, large crowds of people don't seem to impress Jesus. Not at this point. It's kind of like, yeah, everybody's come, Jesus. And Jesus says, yeah, time for us to go. Right? Do you think maybe, isn't it important for us to reach a lot of people? Shouldn't we be trying to reach a lot of people?
Yeah.
How do you bring those together? Do you understand the question there? Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 questions I want us to think about. Let me pray for you. And then the 2 groups, I think Greg's group's going to be here. Dennis's group is going to go next